Okay, it is Sunday evening around 5:50. So this is the second video that I'm going to make today. I'm at Penitentiary Glenn. So we're at a different park. We've been here before. But not as often. Let me check here. I want to make sure that everything is good. I think it is. We're gonna walk all the way to the back and come back to the parking lot. This is right off the parking lot. Little pond here. So being the evening, maybe I'll be a little less loquacious, maybe a little calmer, and maybe we'll just do some observing with not as much gabbing, but we'll see. I think I've said before, I can't promise, and I think almost every time I end up still reverting to my natural state, which is to talk. But we'll see what happens. I try to mix it up at least a little bit. We've been going to Holden a lot. We came here over a week ago, maybe. And I figured something out that I mentioned in one of the previous episodes that I entitled The Quest for Pearson Valley, where I didn't know why the length of the individual videos had increased from about 10 minutes to about 25 minutes. When the GoPro saves video, it automatically terminates every so often and saves that as a separate file. It doesn't just record one large file. And originally, the length of those files was about 10 minutes. And starting with the episode in Pearson Valley, I noticed that the length of those had increased to 25 minutes. And I didn't know why. And I found out why. It's because I have battery saver on. So the original videos were in 4K without battery saver. Somehow in my settings I had set battery saver to be on, and in this particular version of the GoPro Hero camera, that changes the resolution of the video that it's recording from 4K to 1080p. Now 1080p is actually what I want anyways, because when I upload it to YouTube, that's the resolution that I always upload. So it actually makes more sense to be in battery saver mode. It's recording in the resolution I need, so there's less conversion that has to happen. I never save the 4K version, so it's just sort of wasted space and time and battery. This is also why I was able to record almost 2 hours. I think it was 1 hour and 50 minutes in that Pearson Valley recording. And that's the reason why. It used to die at about an hour, and it's lasting almost twice as long now with this reduced resolution. So it's actually working out great, but at least I have an explanation now for it. Because before I didn't. I was trying to set some kind of video resolution setting, and I couldn't find any kind of setting. There's no direct setting to change the resolution, but it's indirectly changed by this battery saver flag. So that was cool. And now and the reason for this being is the file sizes are always about 4 gigabytes. And in the higher resolution 4K, 4 gigabytes corresponds to about 10 minutes of video. In the lower resolution, 4 gigabytes corresponds to 25 minutes of video. So there you have it. All is explained. Technology, right? Can sometimes be very confusing. And this is not the most confusing thing, right? This is relatively simple for somebody who has understanding, but I don't even have that level of understanding right now. This is somewhat new to me, recording videos like this. I used to record videos on a camcorder like decades ago when I was younger, like in my 20s, 30s. My wife and I would record camcorder videos, and I had all kinds of VHS tapes, 9mm, whatever they were. And we still have some of those. I think we converted those to DVDs, and some of those are on YouTube, but not on my personal account. But so long ago, right? So long ago. Technology has changed so much. And I do wish I would have had this GoPro camera when I was younger. It would have made things a lot easier, I think, because the whole process of going from, well, everything's changed, right? Everything's changed. But the process of taking a video and, like, where do you put that video? You know, now that there's YouTube, there's a place to store it. So you can easily watch it without having to pull out your tapes or your DVDs, which I would always lose or misplace. I've lost probably so many videos over the years because of that. Just my organizational skills when it comes to keeping track of things that are tangible and physical. It's not great. So it's actually much better for me to go straight to YouTube, and then I delete it, and then that's the only record of it. Whatever's on YouTube is the only record. I don't keep a separate record. And if it all goes away, it all goes away. It's no big deal. This is just temporary, like everything else. You know, recordings are, I've said this, you know, so many times, right? It's the past is gone. It doesn't even make a whole lot of sense for me to make these recordings, because every day I come out and I do it again. You know, every day I come out and I walk this again, and I don't just say, oh, I walked yesterday, so I don't need to walk today. That's not how I see it. You know, every day is the enjoyment of going out and walking now. You know, it's not like you watch the video and get the same experience as walking, which is, this is very important, right? Because this points out kind of how our memory works too. Our memory is just a recording of what happened, and the recording is never the experience. It's never what actually happened. Just like these videos are not what I'm doing right now. I'm walking, my whole body is moving, I'm seeing things, you know, change constantly. Like, so much is coming in. No video can capture that, no number of words can capture that. It's all new and happening now, and that's why yesterday is a memory and gone, and no reason to hang on to it. But I'm hanging on to it by making these videos, but I'm not, you know, they serve very little purpose other than just documentation, recording. So it is what it is. I think we just are walking, we are talking, we are recording. I don't give a lot of weight to anything I say, and you shouldn't either. It's not about that. It's not about what is said. It's not even about what is recorded. All of that is just temporary. And maybe that's the whole point of this, more than anything, is just to point out that all of this is just temporary and transitory. It means nothing the moment it's gone. It only has meaning now in the present moment as we're walking, right? That's where the meaning is. Not 5 minutes ago, not 5 minutes from now, right? Being here now is what it's all about. And maybe it's the very nature of these videos being temporary and impermanent and meaningless is what gives them meaning, if that makes sense at all. it's just a capturing of what's happening now in some real fragmentary way. But it's so beautiful. Everything that's happening right now is where it's at. So that's what I'm aware of. And I don't know even what I'm saying or what words are coming out. They're just coming out as the mind flows from one moment to the next. But you know, the words are just vibrations in the air that really should just fade into the wind, or like all these dead leaves laying around me. Which, you know, these dead leaves are fertilizer, right? I mean, they become the soil again. You know, there is this cycle, and maybe these words are like that too. That it's not the words themselves, but they can become the fertilizer for your exploration, right? Your own inquiry. Maybe, you know, these words are like that. You know, providing the sustenance, or just, you know, yeah, I don't know, the motivation? It's the wrong word, really. It's not to be motivated, but inspiration, maybe? If there is any, maybe it's inspiring. I know I've been inspired by listening to Krishnamurti endlessly on YouTube, which I have not done as much lately. I think I said this before. I really have kind of stopped watching his videos because I feel like I've seen enough. You know, I mean, there's so many videos. They're interesting, and sometimes I listen to them just, you know, for the joy of it. But there's nothing I want to get out of it. I don't think there's anything that he's going to say that I haven't heard before. You know, he repeats things a lot, but he doesn't repeat it from memory. He repeats it because that's what truth repeats, right? He's always inquiring every time, and this is what it is, right? My observing what he's doing has informed me in such a way that I don't take what he's saying or doing as any sort of truth, but it's the process. It's like what he's doing that's interesting. Right? Every time he comes out, he's like, we're going into this together. You and I, we're like two friends walking in the woods holding hands. I'm not teaching you anything. I'm not your teacher. We're walking and talking, just like what we're doing now. There's no pressure. There's no argument. It's not about one person trying to prove they're right about something. It's nothing like that. It's just the energy between two people in a dialogue, talking back and forth, like we're passing a ball back and forth, like it's a game. You know, we're passing a ball. I say something, you say something. If this were a true dialogue, it would be, you know, me saying something and then you hearing it and then you saying something. And if we had the same intention, the same level, like obviously if you weren't really interested in what is being said, if you're not engaged, if you're not paying attention, again, to where this is going, where the conversation is going, then there's a lack of interest, then there's a lack of energy, there will be no dialogue, right? Then your mind is wandering, thinking about what you're going to have for dinner, or the movie you're going to watch tonight, or whatever, while I might be talking away, and you're not really hearing what I'm saying. So there has to be a shared interest in what is happening for a dialogue to be powerful, right? But in that, when there's the same energy, the same interest, the same openness and awareness, and then something really powerful can happen when two people are having a dialogue. You know, it can become like a shared thinking, you know, like there's a power to it. Truth can kind of emerge maybe in a different way than when just one person is talking. So this is, common in all his videos. He would say this is us going into it together, and I really took that seriously. And he would always say, these are serious discussions. This is not entertainment. It's not meant to be, even though it might be a nice sunny day and we're sitting out in the grass, or like here, it's a beautiful day in the woods and we're walking. It's not just about that. It's not just entertainment. It's like there are serious things that need to be gone into. In my life, in your life, there are problems. Like, we all have problems, and how do we deal with those problems? And, who we are determines how we deal with those problems. And knowing who we are is so important, because that's where it's all at. That's what it's all about, knowing ourselves. And we just spend so much of our life not knowing ourselves, just living day to day like mechanisms in a mechanical way, and not really being free, not flowing with what's happening, living a very prescribed life, right? If everything's planned out and everything's laid out, that's a very uninteresting life. What's interesting is a life where new things are happening all the time. Things are emerging on their own, in their own way, and you're not preventing that from happening. So, like this, we're just out walking. We're not anticipating anything other than the walk. I know the walk, the general layout, but everything I'm seeing today, is different. Like, every time I walk down this trail, I see something different that I didn't see before. And I could walk this trail 1,000 times and I'd still feel the same way about it. As I'm paying attention to what's around me, it's just new and fresh every time. It doesn't get old for me. And that all depends on how you see. Right? If you see deeply, then you see the newness in every moment of every day. Always new. Never old. There's no repeating the same thing in the past. It's like the Chinese proverb, you can never step in the same river twice. And it's like you can never really walk on the same trail twice. It may seem the same, superficially. It's just because you're not looking deeply enough. If you look deeply enough, it's never the same. Every moment is just like creation is in every moment. Creation is new. Every moment is like created, is creating. It's like creation is occurring in every moment. And that is what you can see if you pay attention. And then nothing is old. Nothing is repeated. Every moment is new. You are new in every moment. You are regenerated in every moment. Right? It's like birth and death together. Right? The ending of the previous moment, the beginning of the new moment, but not happening discreetly, but happening continuously, like all the time. Always new. Right? And that is what is really happening. It's not imaginary. That's what's really happening. And that's why I can walk this trail 1,000 times, and every time it's new. It does not get old. Because life is in that moment. Life is in the present moment. This moment, which we call the present, but there really is no present, past, and future. Those are creations. It's just this moment, not present. Present brings in time, and there is no time, and no psychological time, and there is just now. What we call now, but then now even brings in this idea that there's something other than now. There is nothing other than now. There is nothing other than this moment. Nothing. So there's no name that we currently have for it, because we subdivide things in the past, present, and future mentally. And we imagine there's a past. We imagine there's a future. And from that, we imagine there's a now. When in fact, it's just now. And all these other things are just imaginary. So if you see directly, you see that. It doesn't have to be told to you. It's not to agree or disagree. It's just to see. What is this moment that we're living in? And life is only in that moment. It's not in the past or the future. That's why I don't even hang on to like pictures anymore, really, or pull anything out and think about the past. You know, when Facebook pulls up what happened a year ago or 2 years ago, I'm not interested. It's gone. Means nothing. I don't hold on to it. Today is the only day that there is. And in that frame of mind, right, there's no longing for yesterday. There's no longing to be like young again. I feel like I'm in, you know, I mean, I hate to say something that I'll regret, but I feel like I'm in the best shape today now that I've been in my whole life. When I was younger, I didn't even walk this long. I just didn't do it. I think I said before, I spent a lot of time behind a computer, a lot of time in libraries, a lot of time studying, sitting at a desk, being sedentary. I still do. But now I break it up, right? I come out. I make sure I have time where I come outside. If I had my choice, I'd be outside all the time, walking, doing this, nothing else. Because to me, this is living. Like, this is the way our ancestors lived. This is the way humans lived 3 million years ago. What is it, Homo habilis or something? Homo habilis, and then Homo erectus, I think, were the first two of our human ancestors at the beginning of the Stone Age that started using tools. I think even built fires. I mean, it just, like, it goes way back. You know, what humans are capable of doing. And it's like the same things, but like walking, like we've been doing that for millions of years. Like, it's just, sometimes you have to stop and think about that, right? What I'm doing now, my ancestors did for millions of years. They didn't have cell phones. You know, they didn't have even language, but they walked. So just walking is just such an ancient, like, it just ties you in with your most ancient of ancient ancestors. That this is our most primal capability, right? Humans walk. We have 2 legs, and we walk. And for millions of years, we've been doing that. We've been walking for different purposes, right? Sometimes we walk, you know, for survival, you know, to hunt and to forage. Sometimes running to get away from danger. You know, walking from one place to another, where maybe you think life, you know, there's more promise somewhere else. I mean, all these things, except they didn't have all the complicated ideas that we have now, right? It was very simple. It was about just surviving, just, you know, very simplistic. Like, they were alive, they knew they were alive, they were aware, right? They had awareness, for sure. And that awareness, you know, they had to eat, they had to sleep, like, the very basic things that were required for survival, they knew how to do. And they didn't need much more than that. And how far away from that we've moved to where in our present society, like, it's so complicated. Like, we've just constructed, like, we need much more. We think we do. We think we need much more than that, but do we really need any more than that? Still. Like, still, that's the basic function of living. And we've moved away from that. We've moved away from basic survival and just needing whatever it is that we need to survive, which is not very much. And we now, imagine what we do all with our day. I mean, you know, just preoccupied because we need money to survive. We've constructed a society where, like, this very complex social interaction involving money, and you need to work to earn money, and then you need money to pay bills and to buy food, and it's like, what we do, it's so complicated. And it just gets more complicated all the time. And I don't think that we realize that there can be, like, a return to simplicity. And it just starts by stepping back and just observing, like, what is it we're doing right now? Like, what is all this about? Do we see how we're living our lives individually, but also living in society and culture, and we're sometimes so far removed from this basic relationship with nature that we have for millions of years. It's important. And, you know, it's important not to imagine what it was like, right? To be, you know, one of our Homo erectus ancestors. Like, that's imagination, and we don't know what that was like. But that person is in us now. That's not. We are that human from 2 million years ago, right? We still are that human that did those things with a few other little modifications. But we still contain that. You know, we contain that history, that entire human history. And before we were even human, we contain the ancestors of our human, you know, back to the beginning of time. You know, we contain all that within us. The entire universe is like inside of you, right? It's not outside of you. It's not in the past. The past is within you now, right? You contain all of that. You are that. And that's why if you look, right, if you watch, if you know yourself, you know the entire history of humanity, all of it, right? If you see clearly enough, all of that is embedded within you. It's been a long, continuous chain. We think of that as time, right? That we say there was the past, like 2 million years ago, and then there's now. And we separate the past from now, but the past is now. Like, all that happened, you know, the present is just like the past slightly modified, always modifying itself a little bit, you know, from the previous moment. But that previous moment does not exist separately from the present moment, right? There's not these moments that exist separately. There's only this moment, only now. And so that past that we think we understand is really just now as well. So it's there, right? It's there if we look. And the same thing with the future. What we think of as the future is just the past projected forward. But still, the future is contained now. So all time is now. Past, present, future is all now. And you can see it all if you see now. If you really see, all this becomes clear. Past, present, future, every aspect of the infinity, I mean, infinite space is now, because space is also, it's all there to be seen. You just have to know how to look. And you can't look with your memories, you know, your preconceptions, your biases, because that prevents the seeing. So for now, we just walk. Just want to look at something to remind myself of something. Yeah, just to talk about the past species of humans, Homo habilis, which actually means handyman. Lived about 2.4 to 1.4 million years ago in Africa, one of the earliest makers of simple stone flake tools. So, you know, 1.5 to 2.5 million years ago, we had an ancestor, the handyman, Homo habilis, who was making tools out of stone and doing things, right? And then Homo erectus, the upright man, right? That's what erect means, to be upright. The first human to migrate out of Africa, walk upright, right? Master fire, and build hand axes, and lived from about 2 million years ago to about 110,000 years ago, right? Think of the span of time that encompasses, right? And then there's other ones, but like Neanderthals lived across Europe and Asia from about 400,000 to 40,000 years ago, right? Relatively recent. There's some overlap right? There's definite overlap with these species. These species coexisted. Different species of humans. It's like now we don't really have that, right? We don't have different species overlapping. But then, because they were so spread apart, right, and lived in different communities, that there could be different species of humans evolving. They didn't mix as much, right, as we do now. And then, of course, there's other subspecies that I'm not going to mention. But then, Homo sapiens evolved in Africa about 300,000 years ago, up to present time, right? But we also know Neanderthals and Homo sapiens mixed, and you know, everything mixes to some degree, and so that's what we are now, right? So we are that whole history. And it's fascinating to me to just let that, you know, simmer in your mind. Let that scale of time and the ancestors that we were and still are, that are in us, and just think that, you know, they, you know, had aspirations of some kind, maybe not the same way, but like they wanted to live, just like all living creatures want to survive, right? So their actions were driven by survival. And, you know, they used tools to survive. And, you know, I think because there were fewer humans back then, right, there was probably less conflict, because what would the conflict be about? You know, when you think about it, to have conflict, you need ideas of yourself and others. You need, you know, and animals, you know, when animals come across each other, right, when you come across another animal, you question, is that animal food, or is it an enemy, you know, or a mate? You know, there's always like maybe those three things. Should I eat it? Should I run away from it, or have children with it? You know, very fundamental reactions. I imagine that's probably very similar to what our earliest human ancestors were like. And we still have that within us, right? You can't deny that those same tendencies are within you, right? We still are trying to survive. We're still trying to find food. It's much easier for us now. We just go to the grocery store, you know, but wouldn't be if our society collapsed for some reason. Every apocalyptic movie has explored that scenario. We're still afraid. I mean, and you know, movies, you think of movies capture a lot of this, books, movies, the fear, the longing, much more complicated patterns, but like it stems from those basic animal tendencies, right? We come from that, and it's those animal tendencies that are still within us that make us still primitive, right? In a way, we still contain the primitive. And you know, that primitive is very much about survival, right? Our own survival, which has to be, right? Our own survival. If you're, you know, it's interesting because it is very much an individualistic thing. Like if I was, you know, in the past, surviving on my own, I'm not worried about others. I'm just, you know, it's like I have to eat, I have to find a place to sleep, I have to be safe, because you don't have as many interactions with other people, right? There weren't like cities like we have now, so you know, you lived by yourself probably the majority of the time, maybe with your family, maybe a very small community. We don't even know that. Like, we don't know if even like, you know, for that period of time, what was the family structure like? We can't project that back. Maybe, you know, mothers had their children, and then as soon as they were able to, they just went off on their own, kind of like kittens. Like we have these kittens, outdoor kittens that showed up at our house around spring. We were sort of taking care of a feral cat that we had nicknamed Frosty, because she somehow survived the really harsh cold of winter. We fed her, we let her come into our garage. And then it turned out in the spring she showed up with 5 kittens, and we were like, well, that's interesting. And then she disappeared, and we didn't really know what happened to her. I just found out today what happened to her. Some other neighbors down the street said she had a second litter just recently. We hadn't seen her. Other people had been feeding her, so she kind of left our environment. She dropped off her kittens and then left to live vicariously, I guess, or live wildly again in her own way, which I thought was very strange, right? But it was, I guess it's not strange. I mean, whatever her life is in this feral way, it didn't really involve like settling down. You know, cats aren't like people, and they settle down and have families and live together. It's a different perspective, right? They have kittens, they take care of them, they nurse them, and then at some point they just leave, or the kittens leave and survive on their own. They become separate. They don't stay together in the same way that like human families do, right? So we always want to project our own notion of family and relationships onto other animals, but they don't all. It's not always how it is, right? I mean, wolves have packs, and you know, mother bears have cubs that follow them, but at some point the cub goes off on its own. It doesn't stay with the mother bear forever, right? And these things, the way nature occurs, like it's the way it's been. And so it could very well be that our earliest human ancestors were somewhat like that, and that maybe the formation of family units could have been the first like socialization maybe that occurred. Well, it would have been, you know, the family unit, right? The mother and child is a natural family unit. The father maybe being in the picture, maybe not. It's not as close of a relationship, I don't think. Mother-child is probably the most fundamental, right? I mean, that is, even the mother cat, the feral cat and her kittens, I mean, she takes care of them. I hear she's nursing this new litter from the neighbor that told me this. They know that they're her kittens because they saw her nursing them. And, you know, we're doing things to try to take care of them and, you know, get them neutered and fixed and, you know, give them a better life. I mean, who knows how many litters of kittens this feral cat, Frosty, has had. We can't even imagine, right? And what a difficult life to have all these, you know, to just live this way and just produce all these litters and just keep going until you're used up, you know. And I always, you know, feel very sad about these animals that live in the wild under these conditions, and I always try to do what I can to help, you know. But this is what the wild is, right? The wild of nature, that is part of what it is. We can't project our own thoughts on that. So we have to see it how it is, right? But that doesn't mean we can't have compassion for all creatures that live in the wild, that are feral, creatures that we domesticate, and our other fellow creatures, you know, human beings. I mean, that's all, we have to have compassion for all living things. It just naturally comes when you see the relationship with all things, right? You don't have to cultivate compassion. It's like when I see an animal that needs help, I help. I don't think of it as compassion, or, you know, some people say thank you for taking care of the animals, and I'm like, there's no thank you, because it's like, it's just the right thing to do, right? I don't even see it as the right thing to do. It's just what is done, right? When one sees things, one acts, right? It doesn't make a big deal out of it. It's nothing, you know, it doesn't make me feel better about myself. It's just, you know, we're all in it together, right? All of us, that's really what it is. We're just all in this together. Like you and me and all the humans, we're all in it together. All of our other animal friends, the trees and plants, the insects, we're all living on this planet together. And if you just see the togetherness, you know, aspect of it, then it's just natural to help, that we're all helping each other, right? And I always think it's interesting that different species, right, can have feelings for each other, right? Like we love cats, we love dogs, they love us back. Some people say they only love us for the food. I don't believe that. You know, I think it's much deeper than that. Certainly they like the food. That's key to their survival, but it's not the only thing. But yeah, this is just part of what it means to be alive, to help others, right? That's what we're here for. So, yeah, and here we are, you know, walking and contemplating and talking, and, you know, just like our ancestors from millions of years ago, we're doing some of that. We're aware, and we're probably walking just like this, and maybe that's what the appeal of this, the ancientness, right, the primitiveness of the walk, right? The walk takes us back to a time maybe before we took the wrong turn, you know, of human history that has taken us down this path of knowledge. And I do think it is very much like the story of Adam and Eve. You know, I don't take that literally, but I take it figuratively. And in figuratively, there's a truth to that story, because we lived in, say, peace and harmony before we had this knowledge, right? When we just lived day to day, and every day was just survival and finding food to eat, and then eating food and sitting maybe by a fire, you know, that we had, and later on we didn't even have fire to begin with. If you go back far enough, just eating, laying there, looking up at the stars every night, and being aware of being alive, but not being able to express it in words. And that may have saved us, right? Because it was, there's no, we don't make things up, right? We have imagination because we have words, because we have language. So really, and we have language because we have knowledge, right? Knowledge and language go hand in hand. It's the form. Language is the storage mechanism of knowledge. I mean, knowledge can be stored in images, but that's just memories, which is knowledge, you know. And we had that before we had language, right? Memories. That is a form of knowledge, and from that knowledge we constructed patterns of living, but not in the same complex way that we do now. So you could really think that humanity may have taken its wrong turn when we developed language, when we developed knowledge, you know. I follow these different YouTube channels from different students of history, and there's a couple that I follow, and you know, they show things that happened, like statues of two people intertwined. I mean, from the Stone Age. I think it was from like 10,000 years ago or more, before language, right? Language is a somewhat recent invention, and this was before language was really around, but it was a sculpture that someone created that represented sort of the embrace of two people, right? So it's like something that predates, you know, this coupling or relationships, you know, that we formed. Obviously predates language, but it was an expression, right? It was a form, it was a symbolic expression of that. So even before language we had symbols, right? And when you make something like that, that thing represents something. So, you know, we were image making even before language, just in different ways. So there's still so many similarities, right, between now I have to look, just my own curiosity, how long have humans had language? Of course we don't know that for sure, but you know, we have records. Let's see what it says. Oh, okay, well, I probably was wrong then. It says spoken human language is about 150,000 to 200,000 years ago. Matching the emergence. Okay, this is very interesting. And this makes more sense, actually. matching the emergence of anatomically modern Homo sapiens. But then some are saying language went back even maybe 135,000 more years, which is about the origin of Homo sapiens. So, very interesting. Language may have coincided hand in hand with our particular species, Homo sapiens themselves. And this is interesting. I don't think it's one came first, followed by the other. I think language and our species evolved side by side. You know, the language, we evolved because of language, and language evolved because of us, right? It's very interesting. So it could very well be that, and now what happened, right? We're the dominant species now, the dominant human species, and so this development of language probably led to the emergence of violence, war, and the elimination of these other species of humans. I mean, we probably, you know, the knowledge we gained led to, you know, we probably learned to make weapons. We started having concepts and ideas. And with those concepts and ideas, right, we probably started, you know, war and violence came right along with that. That's very interesting. So that is another sort of revelation, maybe, that I had, that, you know, I've never put all this together, like, and just assembled it. Like, I knew these things, but as different facts. And now, when you see the pattern between the facts, right, then something else emerges. The truth behind it all starts to emerge. And now I'm seeing it even just as we're speaking here. Like, I'm seeing things I didn't see before. Like, that language is very much tied with the emergence of Homo sapiens. You can't separate the two. It's not like there were Homo sapiens that didn't have language and then Homo sapiens that did have. It was like the very development of language maybe led to the split, right? That led to this new species that imagine probably, you know, came from, there's earlier ancestors. I think they even said there's a common ancestor to us and the Neanderthals, and it could very well be, you know, we were sort of like the new kids on the block who started like conceptualizing somehow, you know, and there was a flash or something, you could say insight of some kind or another, that led to like this idea that like we could, I don't know, maybe they started scribbling symbols on a cave wall to represent something, and then sounds, you know, I mean, it's just amazing, right? Imagine how this was, like, different sounds to mean things, to associate a sound with like an object. Imagine that. We take that for granted, but that was invented, right? That was invented, this idea that you can make a sound to represent a tree. Like, imagine how that came about. Like, the first people that maybe, you know, you can just imagine, I guess there was a time when sound was just sound, right? We may have made sounds, but they didn't represent anything. And then we started to realize, like, we could use sounds to represent things and communicate that to others. I mean, we again, this is just us now, me now, just imagining what it was like. No idea, right? I have no idea what it was like. I'll never know what that particular, what that was like, except that it's all contained within me. That if I look inside myself now and I see language and how, what language is to me, not theoretically or academically, but how it works, look at it deeply. Not, we take so much for granted. You know, like language, we speak it and then we don't even think, what am I doing? I'm using all these words now. Am I even watching as every word is formed? Like, you can watch every word, right? You can watch your lips moving. You know, you can be aware of like your lips moving to form these words. That's an awareness that, like, maybe before I mentioned that you weren't even paying attention. Now I said that, and are you aware of your tongue and your lips and what they're doing to form these sounds? Sometimes we just gloss over that. We hear language and oh, it's I'm talking, but do you realize the physical part of it? And your lungs, right, have to produce air and push it through your mouth and your vocal cords in a certain way. It's actually pretty amazing, right? I mean, I'm watching it now. I'm watching myself create language. The mind is playing a part, the thoughts are there, but then it's very much tied to our muscular system. There's this physical aspect that our throat, and it's actually kind of weird, right? It's like be paying attention to that formation of words. And but it's right there is something we're not paying attention to that. You're not aware most often of how it's not the brain speaking, right? The brain and the body are working together, harmoniously linked to produce these vibrations that are being recorded right now in this video. And if someone was here, they'd hear what I'm saying and they understand. It's pretty amazing, actually, that this is all happening and that language had developed from a time when there was no language. And here we are. And here we are on the brink of our destruction. So we thought we were so clever, 100,000 years ago, 200,000 years ago. No idea where this would lead, right? It was useful, right? It was useful to have language. It led to the survival, the increased survival probably of that species that developed language. And I feel like it really led to the extermination. I do feel like violence arose from that. I feel like this is just speculation, right? But I'm just sort of seeing like what that would have led to. We can't imagine the individual events that would have occurred, but there was a lot of diversity of human species prior to that. And then after that, I think a lot of that diversity went away. What does that tell you? I think it tells you that we wiped them out, right? We wiped them out. Like Homo sapiens, they gained a technological edge. Now there's water today. Last time we were here, I think this was mostly dry. Maybe a little water. We wiped them out. I mean, I think it's very unfortunate. And we became, think of that violence has probably been in us from the start. And these other species maybe just were living much more peacefully. I feel like they were. They lasted longer. Right? They lasted longer. And then we come around, right? With these great inventions. Language, and then we learn to make more sophisticated tools, and then I think our tools became weapons, right? And then we use those weapons to our survival, to the detriment of others. And why do I say this? Because this is how we are now, right? We are this way now, and we are not very different from our ancestors. This is why we say we've become clever monkeys, clever in our adaptability at the technology that we've developed, but that cleverness is not intelligence. And when we were just small little tribes, it led to, our survival most likely at the expense of others. But now it's like our own survival is on the line. What helped us survive at one point is now going to help us destroy ourselves if we don't see what's happening. And that seeing may be the next evolutionary shift, right? Evolution probably occurs. I mean, maybe there's another species of human, that needs to emerge. I've heard this idea before. And again, this is an idea. So this is like speculation. This is fantastic. But let's just say there's another, why not? Another species of human that maybe sees the truth. Homo illuminus, Homo awakis. that sees the harm in what Homo sapiens have done for 300,000 years and wakes up to that, sees it. Again, seeing is the truth. And sees that harm and then says, that's not how we live. We can't live like that. We won't survive. And sees this higher intelligence that we've maybe never seen before. You know, and then realizing from that there's a different way to live than we've been living for the last maybe 300,000 years, right? I mean, we've been doing the same thing. And you think of these cultures today that are just like variations on who we were 10,000, 20,000 years ago. And I bet wars didn't even really start forming until later on, right? As humans became more sophisticated at building weapons. And you know, you think of how weapons probably progressed. We probably had clubs, right? Maybe even in the Stone Age we had clubs, rocks, threw rocks at each other. You know, that was probably the first thing, right? Pick up something heavy and you throw it at someone else, and you know, it was a weapon, you know. And then we probably got more sophisticated and, you know, picked up a stick and realized we could just swing it around and, you know, as a club. And then we developed more advanced clubs. I mean, you can just imagine this happening in this way. But it's like now it's maybe time for us to wake up. Maybe it's time for humanity to take a step back and say, yes, that is our history, that is who we are. There's no denying that. But just in the way we developed language, we developed tools, it's time to see the truth of who we are. And through the seeing of that truth, end the violence and the discord and disharmony and chaos that are causing our destruction and will cause us to become destroyed. So we have reached the other end. It's been 2.2 miles to the nature center where we started, so now it's another 2.2 miles back. So let's go. I don't know how long we've been talking. Let's see. It's usually about an hour. I've probably been going a little slower because I'm talking. Exactly 57 minutes. So it's taken us a little under an hour to get here, and we might just make it back. It'd be pretty cool if I can make it all the way back before the tape runs out, before the battery runs out. I'm on battery saver mode, so we might happen. We got 1 hour and 51 minutes out of it in our quest of Pearson Valley, and today this is the quest of Glenn, I guess. But I'll probably title this video something, the evolution of man or something, because I guess we're really digging into that today. Or is there another human species waiting to be born, right? Homo luminous, you know, the one who sees the light, you know, becomes illuminated, who sees truth. I don't know. I mean, I don't think truth is something that comes about as a process of time, but that doesn't mean that I don't think there can be a change to our brain. I mean, truth, I think seeing truth brings about a physical change to the brain. I think that's true. The very cells of our brain itself, the connection, something happens. That the order, right? Because it's like order is there. Order, you know, systems want to tend towards more order if they can. I mean, sure, we have entropy. We know entropy is a tending towards disorder, but life does the opposite. You know, life tends to form patterns of order out of chaos. Like, we shouldn't exist, right? If entropy were all there was, we wouldn't exist. because the universe was in disorder when it started, and it would have just maintained itself in disorder. But that's why that's not the whole story. Entropy is certainly is a physical concept from physics that is well understood, can be measured, it's quantifiable, but it does not tell the whole story. And the story of life, I think, tells the other story. Right? Life, in some sense, is order that arises from disorder. Maybe that's the best definition of life. You know, is because we have to be orderly to live. I think we talked about this before, but like the order that a living thing requires so many things to happen. It's an amazing, every living thing is like an amazing little system that all these things have to work together to sustain that life. But there's no thinking for it. There's no thinking involved, right? These plants are growing with no brain guiding it. No brain is telling these plants how to grow. They know how to grow naturally. And what does that mean? Right? We say they know how to grow. They don't. We're not saying no in the sense of knowledge that we say it's intelligence, right? It's not knowledge. We've made this distinction before. It's almost obvious that there is this distinction, right? There's an intelligence that allows these plants to grow with no brain, right? We have a brain, which causes us all sorts of trouble. I mean, it's the source of thought, right? This thing called thought, which plants don't suffer from that disease. They don't have thought. There's no brain. There's no nervous system. That's an animal thing. And but to grow into what they become, right? A corn stalk produces corn, right? That we eat. If it didn't have the intelligence from that single kernel of corn, can grow an entire another plant of corn, right? It propagates itself. That's another amazing thing about life is, you know, how life, it wouldn't be here if it didn't, right? So, I mean, it's no big surprise. I mean, we wouldn't have corn right now if the seeds of the corn didn't grow new corn plants, right? They would have died off a long time ago. So life requires like this continuity, cycles, birth, death, always occurring. But it's always continuous. You can't, like, think of a corn, right? This is a great example. You take a kernel of corn and it's planted in the ground and it grows into a huge corn stalk that then produces many other ears of corn. From those ears of corn, you can take the single kernels again and grow a whole new plant. And that just continues and continues and continues. And we can interfere as humans, right? We've grown, in fact, corn is one of the things that humans have played a big role in changing. Corn from even hundreds of years ago was like very tiny. Nothing like the corn we have today. So through, selecting different genetic patterns, I'm not thinking of the right words, breeding for certain traits that we find desirable, like larger ears of corn, we have engineered slightly modified versions of corn. We didn't create anything new. Through selection, right? Through selection and breeding. And of course, there is genetic engineering now that enters into all this, which is us messing around at a different level, but still playing around with nature. We didn't create anything. We're just altering things at the lower structure that are already there. We're just sticking a stick in the beehive and seeing what happens through genetic engineering, but we're producing corn. But the idea being that that's a cycle of life that continues and continues and continues, with little variations in each generation, large or small variations, and we need that to survive, right? We need to eat that to survive. And even if we eat animals, those animals we eat eat other animals, or eventually it comes down to animals that eat plants, right? No animal makes its own food, so every animal must eat a plant. I mean, at some point or another, there's a plant-eating animal that that is eating plants to survive. Then other animals may eat that animal, but like it all goes back to plants, right? What comes from the ground, what grows on its own. Plants produce their own energy from the sun, right? So the sun provides that energy for plants to grow that then some animals eat, and it's the source of all life. The sun, right? The sun is behind it all. In addition to warming the planet, it also is responsible for growing all the plants, either naturally occurring or ones that we use for food. So this is all happening all the time, right, to keep us alive. And this is, of course, another invention of humanity, agriculture. When we learned that we could plant certain things in a certain way, instead of us being hunter-gatherers and just gathering what we find in the woods, we started figuring out we can plant those seeds and grow it right in our backyard. Cultivate, right? We learned to cultivate. Very interesting, right? These are very powerful inventions that human beings figured out that allowed us to form. Once we started planting things, we then formed cities. In fact, I think it was agriculture that led to cities, because you have to tend to your crops, right? Once you're not a hunter-gatherer anymore, you're not just a wanderer. You have to stay put long enough to plant the seed, water it, take care of it, fertilize it, do whatever you have to do to make it grow, and harvest it. And then if you harvest it, where do you put the harvested goods? You have to store it. So we started probably building structures to store grain. I think beer, if I remember right, beer was one of the first, well, wheat, right? And from wheat you can form ales. And some of the earliest, like, I'm sure beer kind of went hand in hand with agriculture, because when you have wheat and other plants that ferment, right, naturally, and probably happened first by accident, and then humans figured out how to, we see patterns, right? The human mind, brain sees patterns. It sees something happening there and tries to figure out the causality of it, what caused that, and eventually figures it out. And I think when we figured that out, we started making beer, right? And beer actually, we look at it as sort of a negative thing, but people used to drink weak beer because it didn't have as many harmful properties, right? The alcohol in the beer has a sterilizing effect, and a lot of times water in its natural state has contaminants that are unhealthy. Producing beer actually may have been one of our first sustainable forms of nourishment, of hydration. Very weakly, I'm sure, right? Very weak beer is more sterile than just water you pull out of a stream. So really, I mean, I think we could say civilization started from beer, right? We may not want to admit it, but more than likely that's what happened. Obviously the beer we have today is very high in alcohol content, but I'm guessing, and I believe it's true, I think there's some archaeological evidence for it that I've run across, that agriculture and production of beer, as far as we can tell, developed fairly parallel with each other. And I'll look this up later, because now I'm not sure, and I won't whip out my phone and start looking it up, but I've heard of that before. It makes sense to me why that would be too, right? The sterilization process. And when you think of it, think of how many people died by drinking contaminated water right? So once we figured out a way to purify water through this fermentation process, then people would live longer, right? They would live longer, and because they live longer, they passed on their knowledge of beer making to their other generations and producing wheat. And, you know, maybe it was less about food and more about water, more about beverage, you know. I'm almost inclined to think agriculture started as a water purification system. You know, it makes more sense to me. Because we had food. I mean, people ate animals and, you know, I think, you know, berries, and you could find a lot of food, but you couldn't find drinkable water. I mean, yes, you could. I mean, a lot of streams, I think, were pure, you know, not like today where everything's contaminated. You can't consider drinking water out of a stream because you'll get sick with something because of the pollution. So things were much less polluted then. So water streams were pure, but I still think that there's something to be said about that fermentation process being very sort of fundamental to the beginnings of agriculture and purification of water. That was very advantageous, right? And I think all the trouble began there in more ways than one, right? We started forming cities with agriculture. We had to stay put long enough to grow things, harvest things, whatnot. And once we started creating cities, you had a lot of people living together, right? Unlike when we were hunter-gatherers, we were more sparsely, you know, we ran into each other every once in a while, said hi, see you later. But now you needed more people to plant the seeds, to tend the crops, to harvest. So, I mean, cities arose out of the needs of agriculture, I think, right? Went hand in hand. And then naturally, when you put people together who used to live apart, now they're all living together, but they're gonna fight, right? Naturally, because now the idea of possessions starts, right? You possess, like agriculture and crops now is a possession. When you think of before that, it was like they probably just hunted through the woods. What they found, they ate. They probably didn't, maybe you made some tools, and those were possessions. So I guess tools could be, I'm sure tools were sort of the first form of possession, but they were probably so easy to make. There was no reason to steal a tool from another person. You just make your own, you know, clank two rocks together and make a sharp rock and use it as a tool. Like, it's not a big deal. You don't need to steal it from another person. But crops, agriculture, think of that. And what I also am sure that happened is there were those that knew how to do it, and there were those that didn't. The haves and have-nots, right? The same story we have today. The rich, right? And we call them the rich and the poor, or the haves and the have-nots. And I guarantee you, when agriculture developed, the people that developed it formed their own communities separate from the people that didn't. And I guess the people that didn't got jealous and said, hey, those people have something I don't have. Look at that. They're all living together. They're producing food. They're producing beverages. You know, I want that. And I don't want to take the time to do it myself. That's a lot of work they're putting into doing all that, right? I just want to take it. I mean, you can almost, I mean, we're just reimagining human history here, but this has got to be what happened. Then you had people, because they separated themselves from other people, then you have those people wanting to take what those other people have, which naturally led to greed, violence, right? So now people probably have to develop weapons for defense as well as to fight, right? You have to ward off those invaders that are going to come and steal your crop, your food that you spent all the time growing, right? So farmers, right, the ones that actually did the work, I know, right? There was those people who, you know, they had the intelligence and knowledge to do it, and then you had the people that would come and take it, right? Both kinds of people. We still have them today. We have people that create, and we have people that take from the people that create. That is that is so fundamental to human nature, right? It may be intellectual property theft now, right? Where you may create some new idea or algorithm or method or something, and then someone else comes along and says, well, thank you very much. I'm going to take that idea that you spent time developing and use it for my own purposes, right? And I mean, that's people. Then people hire lawyers and they fight it out in court, and that's our modern day version of all this. But I'm sure it all started with agriculture, because it was the earliest possession worth taking, right? And of course, there's the other side of it, where you could invade the community, take it over, bully the people around to do your bidding. But that's not sustainable, right? See, and that's where I think those societies fail, because that kind of aggression is self-destructive. And a peaceful society, right, where everyone's working together, producing, using their knowledge beneficially, and they're all contributing, can last a very long time, right? Because people are helping each other, working together. But this sort of like, even if you come in and take over, right, you've destroyed the harmony of that community. You may get a temporary gain, but that form of society will collapse eventually because of the violence, the inherent violence. People are not going to stay in that situation. They'll find ways to escape, to run away. Who wants to be in bondage, right? When you could run away and then form your own community again. So I think what happens in a situation like that is, yes, the aggressors come in, take control for a while, order people around, but eventually those with intelligence leave, right? They leave and form another society. Again, right? They have the knowledge to do that. They can do that. They can go away and start over, far away from the people that cause trouble. I mean, this has got to be how society operated. Nations formed, different tribes, different cities, right? And it's how we're still doing it today. And this is why I say we're not that different, right? When you go through this reasoning, we're sort of exploring here what may have happened, because it still makes sense to us today from our own human behavior, from our own human tendencies. We can say that these must be similar behaviors of our ancestors. Not exactly the same, but very similar. And we can understand what they may have gone through by just examining our own mind. So we understand greed. We understand what it means, some of us at least, to create new things, new ideas, to invent things, to make things, to be productive. Right, but we also know what it means to be greedy, to take from others. I mean, everyone does that to some degree. Not everyone survives on their own. We all take. We may pay something for it, right? But that taking, even when you go buy food in the supermarket, right, you're taking what somebody else put the time and energy to build. I mean, we still have this today, right? We still have agriculture today. The farmers who make the food, who are out there spending, who know how to do it. And then us who, like, I'm not a farmer, I don't know how to do that. But we've developed a more sane system, right, of paying people, right? We're not fighting each other now, and that's in the same way, but somebody else is producing the food. Now we have currency, we have money. That was another invention, where we exchange something of value for that food. Like, see, and that stabilized society. When you think about currency and that trade, it makes sense that the trade came about, right? Rather than people just being violent and taking everything, which just leads to destruction. It makes sense that the natural thing was, hey, I have something of it. Maybe I do something over here. I make clothes, right? You guys need clothes. I'll trade you those clothes for some of your wheat. Imagine when that first happened, the first trade, right? That it must have been very interesting, very rewarding. That like when different tribes, they probably developed different skills, right? It makes sense that different tribes, because of just whoever figured out agriculture, other people figured out probably how to make tools that could be useful for agriculture, right? The making of the tools to till the soil, plows, hand, instruments that were probably used to dig into the soil. I mean, you needed tools for that. So if you were the tool maker, you make the tools, you trade those tools for some of the crop, the result of the agriculture, and you can live harmoniously that way by helping each other out, right? That's order. That's orderly living. And that's how order comes about in society as well, because the disorder is the violence, the fighting, which is not sustainable, right? Life can't exist in a state of disorder. In a state of disorder, life ends, right? The body can't, if the body were fighting itself, the body would die. If one part of my body started fighting another part of my body would die, right? My body only lives right now because all the parts of it are working together harmoniously. And I'm alive because of it, right? So life requires order and harmony. Harmony being things working together peacefully. Things helping. There's a helping to harmony. Harmony is like two things that help each other to produce something better, right? So all the organs of my body are working together to keep this body functioning. And because of that, every part of the body is doing better than if they were separate, right? If the heart was separate, it wouldn't survive. If the lungs were separate, it wouldn't survive. It's all these organs working together that allows the body as a whole, which contains all those organs, to survive, right? Order and harmony are required for life. And so it's the same true of society, right? Society is like an extension of the body to, another level, right? And if we don't have harmony in society in the same way that the body requires harmony to live, societies will suffer the same fate of death and destruction unless we find order in our societies. We must have order. So, see, what's interesting is we're leading to sort of, by just observing ourselves and observing, what has worked, right? And we see the pattern that emerges is order is necessary for survival of living things. If we didn't care about living things, everything could just go back to a primordial soup. And I guess that's okay. I mean, it's probably going to happen eventually when the stars all supernova, and at some point in the universe, all this will turn back into a soup of subatomic particles. I mean, and I guess maybe the universe will start over, collapse back down, the big crunch. If the entire universe cycles just like everything else, which would make sense, then the universe is expanding at the moment. It will eventually collapse back down into a singularity, and everything will start over, right? And this could be very well, I believe actually in Hinduism, that is the way that they see the different epochs of existence. I think it's been, this is not a new idea, but we don't need to read it in a book. We can just say that is likely how things are. It makes sense that everything behaves according to cycles of birth and death. We see the pattern all around us. But what it's leading towards here, all this discussion, right, is that we don't currently live in a harmonious society. We live in a very disorderly society where there's a lot of death and destruction and disease and fighting and violence and chaos, and we have people starving, and we have people sick, and there is a way. We all know there is a way that we could all be living together harmoniously. We know this to be true, but we don't currently have such an orderly society. It's not there. And all we see around us is a very disorderly world, a very disorderly society. And our natural tendency is to say, how do we fix this? How do we impose order on a disorderly system? So we recognize the need for order. I think we all know that. The body can't live without order. No living thing can live in a state of chaos. In fact, that's almost the definition of death, right? That when disorder arises in a living thing, it will tend to die, right? Disease is sort of a disorder brought about from one mechanism or another that leads to the destruction of the body. Disease takes many forms. So disease can be thought of as different mechanisms of bringing disorder about in an otherwise orderly body, right? That's persisting and moving along and has some continuity. And then disease comes along, whether it be cancer or something else, and wipes that particular body out because it just starts, cells start multiplying out of control. There's no harmony anymore. Without harmony, a body can't live. Tumors form, tumors spread, and that particular body comes to an end. Right? That's the result of disorder. And right now, we have that disorder in our society, just like cancer. Right? It is spreading like cancer through our society. And it may be too late, and it's not possible sometimes to save, somebody with cancer. Could be that it's out of control, it's reproducing too fast. But what we see is, we don't know that. What we do know is order must be restored. There's no doubt. Right? That is truth. Without order, our society can't continue. Our humanity can't continue without order. The question is, how does order come about? This is where we get it wrong. It's not that we know there needs to be order, but then when we come up with ideas about what that order needs to be, that's where we make the mistake. We think we can think our way to order. We think we can come up with ideas of order, what an orderly society should be. Right? And those ideas form political systems, religious systems, economic systems. And then we think, and this is the problem, thinking. We think that if we impose that system on everybody, that society will become orderly. We'll take a disorderly society and bring order to it. And that has not worked. It's been tried over and over again. This is what has happened in society. This is what has brought us to the current state of affairs. And I think what we need to recognize, that doesn't work. So now I'm realizing I have 24% left battery. So if I hope to come to any conclusion here, I will have to wrap this up. But you see where I'm getting at. Well, maybe you don't. We can't bring about order from our disorderly mind. As long as our mind remains disorderly, we cannot bring about an orderly society. That is worth thinking about, right? But doesn't it just make sense? How can a disorderly mind create an orderly society? So right there, I think we would say, that sounds true. I don't see how disorder. So then we say, okay, so in order to bring about an orderly society, we need an orderly mind, right? It's the natural next step. You see, because our society comes from our mind. Society has been created by the human mind. All these forms of society that we have, different countries, and every division that we've created politically, nationally, I mean, all this that has happened is a result of the human mind. And so the disorder in our society is a reflection of the disorder of our mind. They are one and the same. You cannot impose. So then again, a disorderly mind cannot bring about order. So we need an orderly mind. How does one bring about an orderly mind? Can one do that by imposing order from the outside? That's what we've tried to do. Right? We try to say, okay, everyone's disorderly. We come up with rules for society, right? Laws, rules, codes of ethics, whether they're religious precepts, governmental precepts, whatever they may be. We try to come up with a system for imposing order. But where does that system come from? A disorderly mind. Can't work, right? You cannot bring about order no matter what system you think you have. You can't impose that order from the outside in. Orderly mind can only come from the inside out, the other way around. The order has to come from within, from this intelligence, from this universal intelligence, which is the definition of order, right? We have to allow our mind to become orderly, not make our mind orderly, right? Once we have an orderly mind, once there is an orderly mind, an orderly society can come about. It's not the other way around. Society cannot come up with rules to create an orderly mind. And this is why we have criminals in society, right? Because no matter what rules you impose upon people, there's always going to be people that violate those rules because they don't see the reason for those rules. They don't understand why we have those laws because they don't have the understanding. Their mind is disorderly. And then it doesn't matter what rules the society comes up with will not change the disorder of that mind. You have to get at the disorder of that mind directly. That is education. We're coming back to education being the foundation of an orderly society. You can't without, and true education, now I'm not saying education the way it's done now, because I do not believe that is what we are talking about. But let us say education is the way of bringing about an orderly mind. To learn is to bring about order. As we learn, our mind becomes more orderly. But not through the accumulation of facts and knowledge. That is not bringing about order. We've talked about that before. Science and technology have advanced incredibly, but it has not brought about an orderly society. So this isn't about like science. We're not saying science will bring about an orderly society. It will not. The order must come from this cosmic intelligence, if you want to call it that. Not human. Not human. Now I'm not bringing in supernatural elements, right? Don't mistake what I'm saying for being supernatural. What I am saying is there is an order to this universe. We already talked about it. Plants grow because of this order. Our bodies exist right now because of this order of the universe. It is not supernatural. It is natural. It is very super. It is amazing. It is wonderful. It is beautiful. It is the reason life exists. But it is not supernatural. It is natural. It is the order, the universal order. The order of this universe that has led to us being here. That is order. It's already within us. We already have that order within us. This is what we don't understand. It's already there. We don't have to create it. We have to let it emerge. We have to get out of the way. The mind, there's hindrances. The mind has created hindrances. The Homo sapiens mind right? We've evolved with a mind that has created, through its ideation and thought-making process, it has brought disorder to what was orderly, that was there naturally. And it's still there. The only reason we're alive right now is because of this order. But we're constantly fighting it. We're constantly thinking we know better. We're constantly saying human thought can supersede that intelligence, that natural intelligence of our body, the natural intelligence of nature. It cannot. It cannot. And when you see that this intelligence of nature is much more powerful, beyond human thought, way beyond it, right? Human thought can't grow a plant. It is embedded within nature itself. The laws of nature, the order of nature is embedded there. Within that, all of that structure, the genetic structure contains information that just works when given soil, water, air. It grows, right? That amazing process that occurs is intelligence itself in its most pure form. Not human thought. It has nothing to do with it. Human thought is the problem. Human, Homo sapien thought has created the disorder of our society. And I think this is, can we realize that? Not see ourselves as the pinnacle of evolution, right? We often see ourselves at the top of this evolutionary ladder. We've made a mistake. Evolution has made a mistake, in a way, that has led to the near destruction of this entire planet. And one way of curing that mistake is to wipe us all out, right? That human society in its self-destructiveness. Hey, a little deer over there. Hey, buddy. Hi. We may just wipe ourselves out and problem solved. The earth moves on. Other species come and go. I mean, that is likely what's on the course of happening, unless something changes. That is our trajectory at the present moment, is to wipe ourselves out and take a large chunk of this planet with us. But life will go on. Life always finds a way to go on. Anyone that watched Jurassic Park knows that. Life will find a way. We just won't. We will end. The human experiment will end unless something happens, unless order is brought to the human mind. Not we bring order, because we are disorderly. But if order comes to the human mind, and the mind becomes orderly, society will naturally follow. An orderly society follows an orderly mind. It can't work any other way. So all of our efforts, should not be in politics, should not be in religion as it's traditionally known, should not be in economics. It should be about bringing about an orderly mind. Only in that way will the problems of this society end, because in an orderly society we would not have the problems we have now. In an orderly society, everyone would have food. Everyone would have whatever medical care we can have, right? Within limits. There's all limits to everything, right? I mean, we're not talking about anything that is unnatural. There are natural limits to everything. And we're not going to cure everyone from every disease. That's not going to happen. But the disorder in our society is not caused by natural problems. It's human manufactured. Hi. So, what I guess I'm really saying is, there's a return to nature, right? A return to nature, the intelligence of nature, the intelligence of this planet, of the cosmos. I'm not talking about imagining what that intelligence is, because we do that already. I'm saying there is an intelligence there that can emerge, can awaken right? There can be the awakening of intelligence of that kind if we stop hindering it. We hinder it through human thought. We hinder it through our human activities that are created by thought. We hinder it by, as the first emperor of China did when he created this fantastical tomb with 8,000 terracotta soldiers and rivers of mercury, and had this imagination of life after death, and killed people in the process. That is disorderly. That is disorder. Killing people is disorder, right? Murder, all this is disorder. It's disease. That's not it. So we have to see what has caused us harm, how human thought has caused all these problems that we have, and to see then that we need to step back from that. So, alright, I think we are probably going to wrap this up. And I think, I think you see where this is headed, right? We must have an orderly mind to bring about an orderly society, but I'm not gonna tell you any rules for this, because there are none. I'm not proposing another system. I'm not proposing another method for bringing about an orderly mind. And I'm not saying, what I will say is there is none that it currently exists. These methods that we have, meditation, religion, all this that we think are doing that, are not doing that, because they come from a disorderly mind. The human mind cannot bring about order within itself through thought. But the human mind itself has order within it, right? The mind itself, this amazing brain and system, has order. But thought, this just tiny little part of it, has disrupted it all. So we have to let that order emerge, awaken, let that intelligence that is not human thought emerge to bring about. That intelligence is order, will bring about an orderly mind, will bring about an orderly society. It is possible. It is possible. Okay, I think we need to end it there. We are coming up on 1 hour and 42 minutes. I think last time it conked out at 1 hour and 51 minutes. I mean, we could talk for 10 more minutes, but I don't think we need to. That's a good place to end, and I think it's a good thing to think about. I mean, to whatever extent we can use thought and reason, and we should up to a point, right? We should up to a point to see the reason, the sanity behind the statement that a disorderly mind cannot bring about an orderly society. That is, maybe that'll be the title of this video, right? Because this is the crux of it. But you can't then, from there, come up with a system for bringing about an orderly mind. But an orderly mind is necessary. This may sound like a conundrum, but it's not. It's because you have to break out of thinking you can create an orderly mind from a disorderly mind. A disorderly mind, in the same way that a disorderly mind cannot bring about an orderly society, a disorderly mind cannot bring about an orderly mind. Right? That should make just as much sense. And we're always starting from a disorderly state. Everything that anyone's ever proposed to you is a form of disorder that cannot bring about an orderly mind. So something else has to happen. That's what, we're getting to. But that something else is not known. It is not within our field of knowledge. It cannot come about by thinking. So, okay, I'll end it there, and we'll, maybe I'll see if we can squeeze in another 10 minutes before the battery dies, but I want to end this so we don't lose anything. So, have a good day. I hope this walk was very enjoyable for me. It was nice talking to nobody, myself or whoever I'm imagining I'm talking to, whoever may listen to this one day, have a good day and have a good life.